The story, guys. Got a small correction vid that I got to do. Everything's done and dusted with the election now and all the final figures in, and the turnout was actually 45.8%, so only the second worst turnout in the history of the state in a presidential election. She just managed to nib Michael D at the post there at the end by 2%. So we just have to settle for the second worst turnout plus the highest, most historic spoil vote in the history of the state. So my claim that it's the lowest doesn't stand. In my defence, if you look at the other video that I did up on this, when I left at 10 o'clock on the night of polling, all the sites were saying that everywhere in Dublin only had a turnout of about 31 to 36%. They all magically the next day turned out to be in the 40s. That's a 30% differential. I know tallies are tallies, but that's a huge difference. So when I did that vid, it was tracking to be the worst turnout ever. And there were some squirrely moments in the counts as well. I was really looking forward to the results from Dublin North West. Mainly because I was listening to talk radio earlier on the whole day, and that seemed to be the one area which was storming ahead in the spoiled votes. It actually at one stage, I think around 20 to 1, there was more spoiled votes coming in than votes for either Catherine Connolly or Heather Humphries. I got a screenshot from the journal that I'm just going to throw up there now that you can have a look at, which confirms what I'm saying. And that the person they were talking to, the tally man, said, I think that 120 votes came in his box for Catherine Connolly, and it was 128 for the spoiled. And he was just poleaxed. He said he'd never seen anything like this in his life. So I was kind of hoping we were going to get an outlier. Generally, in our general elections or a referendum, there's always at least one place that just goes completely against the grain to everyone else. In the family and care referendum, I think it was Dunleary Rathdown. I think they were the only guy in the country to accept either of those referenda, while everyone else rejected them. And I think during the gay marriage referendum, I think Roscommon voted against that while everyone else accepted it. And Donegal might have turned against divorce. But that's going way back. So I was kind of hoping the outlier here would that we'd have at least one constituency to actually have the most votes to go to the spoiled one, just to really put the cat amongst the pigeons. And again, I got to emphasise just how amazing all the spoiled votes were. You can draw a comparison between Catherine Connolly's performance and the family and care referendums that we had last year, in the sense that as soon as the box was open at 9 o'clock, by about 9:15, everybody knew they were being rejected, and by 12 o'clock, the announcement was made that both of them had failed. The media were hoping to be able to do the same thing with Catherine Connolly's election, but unfortunately, when it got to 12 o'clock, they couldn't make the announcements because they had to tally all the spoiled votes. And I was listening to Brendan O'Connor at this stage, and some tallyman had rang in to give out saying he was absolutely disgusted at all the spoiled votes because that meant he had to keep counting till 6:30 at night. Sorry, 6 o'clock. That's what he thought he'd be stuck on. So I was watching Dublin Northwest. As I said, if you've seen in that journal article there, it was breaking for the spoiled votes. They were already beating Humphries and Gavin combined. Sorry, not combined, in total. But then it just died. There was nothing for about 6 hours. Indeed, we didn't get the figures for Dublin Northwest, or the figures for Waterford for that matter, till after 7:30. It was actually after the announcement in Dublin Castle by the announcer that Catherine Connolly had won, and they actually gave us the full totals for the country, the figures that I have up there now that are the final tally. And he did that at about 7:20, I think, and then like 5 minutes later the figures actually filled in on the websites. It's just bizarre. I mean, usually we would know in advance when it's done and dusted from the websites, from the presidential one on the government site, from either the Indo one or from the RT one. And I've just never seen this before. What's really baffling is, though, I just stuck up the figures there for Dublin Northwest. There's only 25,000 votes. There's only 5,033 odd, I think, that were spoiled. Why did it take 6 hours to count that? I mean, if you compare it to constituencies like Dublin Northwest or Dublin Southwest, they've far bigger populations. They were done and dusted hours beforehand. The only thing I can think of is that this was actually the biggest spoiled votes in the entire country, 20.5%. And it did indeed beat both Gavin and Humphries. So maybe somebody somewhere was definitely trying to mess around with the votes to get it somewhere where Humphries would be ahead, so the spoiled vote wouldn't look as good as it was. I don't know, that's just getting a bit conspiratorial now. But it just seems bizarre for such a low figure in terms of votes to take so long to be counted. The only other thing that I could see, and it's been a bit petty to say this, but because those figures weren't factored in, RT was able to say on the 6 News that there was a 46% turnout. It dropped down after these ones were put in. But all in all, it's just one of those weird oddities that we got out of the whole election. The fun part now is the international reaction. Our lot, as you can expect, are basically being slavishly sycophantic to Catherine, saying that this was a landslide result and it's 60% odd, it's absolute slam dunk of a win. how it's a huge momentous day and a shift to the left for the country. But the simple reality is, if you actually look at the stats, she only got 25.29% of the entire electorate. And this is kind of the reason why I'm doing this channel, because the media would have you believe that it's a huge movement out there in terms of her representing the country. Well, the fact is 3 out of 4 people want nothing to do with her. She is president, but it's with the most hollow of victories. And even the international media isn't that arsed. The model things I've seen in PBS and MSN all seem to be wrote by some Indian girl for Associated Press, and they just seem to be copy and pasted across most of the world. It's a more sedate affair in how it describes what actually happened, and it does point out that we've got the highest numbers of spoiled votes ever, which it marks as being worth noticing. I think more worrying is what things like the Washington Post is saying, because the Washington Post has reported her victory as, well, pretty scathing. I always thought that was a bit of a lefty newspaper, but they're basically asking questions about who funded her trip to Syria, why she's so soft on Russia, and outright describing her as anti-American and anti-NATO. Which, funny enough, is what Heather Humphries was said the international press would think anyway. So once the Irish media here get over their celebrations and start looking at how they now sit in a global operation, it'll be interesting to see what they do when they realise that an awful lot of their international peers seem to think that we're now a den of communists, complete with Pravda. So just to clarify from my last vid, not the worst performance in a presidential election ever, only the second worst performance in a presidential election ever, in terms of turnout. And a landslide victory for a woman and a political machine that represents about 25% of the country. There you go, guys. Thanks for liking and subscribing all the other vids in the past, and thanks for coming in.